All right, so today we're going to cover XLOOKUP, and we're going to do some formulas using CHAT GPT to get some XLOOKUPs done. And mostly it will be about most common situations where you would actually use XLOOKUP today. If you really want everything about XLOOKUP, I actually do have a video that covers that. You can actually watch that and learn a lot more, and I cover a lot more in that video, and I talk a lot more about XLOOKUP. This will be more on a surface level, the type of things you would do to get some data from one sheet to another sort of thing. So that's what we're going to do, and for this we're going to use CHAT GPT to actually generate the formulas. For me, I'm going to be using my own implementation of CHAT GPT. And the difference here is that I won't have to type so much, and I'll get most of the things that I need initially generated here, so I don't have to type that information. Other than that, it's basically using the same engine to get the formulas and everything like that. So let me just show you what I've got. So what I have here is this transactions tab, as you can see. And basically, it's just a bunch of transactions. So you can see here we have some information about our transactions. We have stock numbers, we have quantity sold, prices, etc., etc. And we also have customer IDs. Now, those customer IDs can link us to this customers tab on this other sheet, where we have basically information about customers. So you can see we have their IDs here, and basically we have some fake data about these customers in this tab. So we'll try to, basically using that common key of customer IDs, grab some data from customers tab and move it over to transactions here using some XLOOKUPs. So that's what I want to do. So I'm going to generate these formulas using CHAT GPT, then we'll talk about the formula, what it does, how it works, etc. So to generate it with that, so first I need to explain where my data is, what my columns are, etc., etc. And to do that, I'll just go here and just grab that Excel file that I have. I'm going to be doing this in Excel. You can do in Google Sheets if you want to. It doesn't really matter. So for me, I'm just going to grab that file. I have that Excel file, which would be this one right here. I'm going to grab that and it will load the file. It's pretty large. So it has a lot of tabs in it. The ones that I had that I was just talking about was this transactions was one of them. So I'm going to hide this one. So the other one was customers. So I'm going to get rid of all these other ones. So just keep those two. So this is that transactions tab that had all that data that basically this one, right? These are the column names and etc. This is where this information is. So I'll just go back here and add that information down here so that it knows where that data set is, what is the tab name, etc. And I'll add this one too. So, and really, if you work with the original CHAT GPT, you would just have to type all of this here. I just don't have to. So at this point, I'm going to ask to get some data to transactions. So let's say I want to do this. I have this transactions tab here, and I want to go from this customers, and using that common customer ID key, I want to grab, let's say, the state columns information, so customer state, and I want to move that over here to transactions. So I'm going to go and ask that question. So I'm going to say, I'd like to add state information to transactions tab. So something like that. So I didn't even mention that state is in customers. Maybe I should have done that, but I'm not going to do it just to see what happens. So I'm just going to run this and let's see what it gives us. So I'm going to give this a second. Hopefully it will not take forever. There it is. Oh, apparently it did a VLOOKUP. Interesting. So I didn't ask it to do an XLOOKUP, and yeah, I've noticed it will do this. So the default behavior for it is to gravitate towards VLOOKUP all the time. As a matter of fact, why don't we just try this and see what happens? So I'm going to copy this, go back here, and I'm going to just paste this. This would be the VLOOKUP to do this. And as you can see, it did link to the customer ID here, which is G2 being that customer's ID. It goes to that customers tab down here. That is correct. It's linking to this columns, and it's grabbing the data from column number 9, and it's false for exact match. I think that's exactly right. I should be able to copy this formula because it's linking to the entire column. I don't have to do absolute values here. It works. I actually didn't want to do this with a VLOOKUP, even though it did this particular thing with a VLOOKUP. Let me actually go back and ask it to do this with an XLOOKUP. I'm going to say, can you do this with XLOOKUP? So I'll run that. Let's just give it a second. And by the way, those of you who wanted to try this and you left a message last time, make sure you check your messages and your replies so you can get to that. So I'm going to copy this. It did more than I wanted, I think, here, but let's just copy that, go back and actually try that formula. So I'm going to paste that formula here. Again, it's linking to that customer ID, and it should be getting our data just fine. So this works fine for XLOOKUP too. So as you can see, it did do quite a bit more in this XLOOKUP. So as you can see, basically the way XLOOKUP works, you start with your common lookup value. In this case, that's this G2, right? This customer ID. Now then we have to say in which column we're going to search and find that ID. And you can see here, it's linking to customers tab, column A. And if I just go to that customers tab, you'll see that in column A, I do have those customers IDs. So it's going to search that customer's ID in this column of customer IDs. That's good. And then the third argument here, this one, is which column to return our information from. So final results. So that would be I. So if we go to customers tab and look at that I column here, you can see I has states, which is actually correct. So it did do the right column to search and the right column to return. Now, in addition to that, it also did these last two arguments here, which are not really necessary. So we should be able to just not have these two, and this would have worked exactly the same way, like this. So those arguments are actually optional here. And what those do, basically, after the comma, there's this if not found. And if not found is what to do if there is no such customer. So if we search that same ID, we don't find that ID in the list, what should we do instead? And you could do some texts, for example, just say no customer or something like that. You could do something like this. Or if you just want a blank return, you would do this, which is what it had done. So basically, if there is no customer found, we're just going to return an empty cell instead of returning some data. Now, if you don't do this, the default is to give you NA instead of giving you blanks. This will give you blanks. And then it also had one more argument here, which is the type of match. And 0 is exact match, which is the default. So when you don't do this, it's the same as doing the 0 anyways. So that's fine. The formula was actually fine. It works, no problem. As you can see, we got the results. So I'm going to add this label here. Let's call it state. Let's actually go back and add another question. Let's try to get it to return another column. So for example, I did state. Why don't I try to do, well, let's do gender. That should be fine. That would be now returning data from B column. So I'll go back and let me actually just drop all this data again. I'm going to drop this and this. And I'm going to say XLOOKUP. So I wanted to do XLOOKUP this time, so I decided to just do XLOOKUP because it seems to be doing VLOOKUP otherwise. So I'm going to say XLOOKUP gender from customers. So I'll do that. And let's see what happens if I just do this much and run this. and hopefully it will not take forever again. There it is. That's our new formula. As you can see, it got me this. So I'm going to copy that, go back to my transactions and add this here too. I'll just paste it here. As you can see, that's our XLOOKUP. I'm going to add gender. That's this. So it did exactly the same thing. As you can see, it did add that to return blanks if there is no match, and it did the 0 for exact match. Fine. I'm just going to copy this down. No problem. As you can see, we're getting the data. It works. No worries. So that's that. Let's actually try to do something else. Let's try to go to maybe products and get some information from products. So let's just see what's going on here. So if you look here, we have in this transactions, we got the stock numbers. And for the stock numbers in products, we also have stock numbers here in column C. And let's say we're trying to grab some data from here. So let's say I'm trying to get brand information from here. So our matching common key is that stock number. We're trying to get this brand data to transactions. So I'll just add that brand here. So this time the tabs we're working with is transactions and products. That's what we got. So I'm going to go back and let's just add that. So I did not keep that product thing. I'm going to have to redo this thing to get that information here. All right, so now I got transactions. I'll keep this customers in front of me just in case I want to do something with that and get rid of all of these. So right now I'm going to go transactions and products. Those two things I'm going to use. So I'll add that information here in this question. And basically I'll just say XLOOKUP brand from products. That's that. So let's see what it does. I'm going to go ahead and hit send. Give it a second. Let's see what formula we get out of this. So I'll copy this, go back to my spreadsheet, just paste it right here. Let's see if that actually gets me the data. So as you can see, it did go with stock numbers. It did figure out that's our common key. I didn't tell it. That's the common thing. It just figured it out. So that's B2 being the stock number here. And then it went to C column to search and E column to grab the results. And again, if we go to products, you see stock numbers are in C and E brand. Same thing. It does seem to always do this blank for no returns and 0 exact match, which is fine. So we got our information. I got my brand data. So it's able to do this. I'm very curious, would it be able to get this done with a VLOOKUP too? Let's actually just ask and see what it does. So I'm going to go back and say, can you do this with VLOOKUP? This would be a little more difficult than the other one. So I'm going to copy this, but I think I got it right. So I'm going to go back here and paste it here. So, okay, so it didn't do this correctly. So it kind of did, but it's not linking to the right spot. So let's actually go back and add that data information first before we ask the question, because I was just doing the question without the data this time. So I'm going to actually add that data boundaries and all that stuff. And I'm going to say VLOOKUP brand from products. So let's see, given all of that information in addition to this, will it do the right formula or not? So it did not do this. It does do this CE thing. It's grabbing from the same spreadsheet. So let's uncheck this and try this again if it will do that right with another thing. So interesting, with XLOOKUP, it didn't have this problem. With VLOOKUP, it seems to struggle more for some reason. So I'm going to say VLOOKUP, again, brand from products. And let's just not tell it to use the formula from the same sheet data, even though I didn't have to do that for XLOOKUPs. Okay, so it did it in this weird way. That's fine. I'm going to copy that, go back and paste. And let's see. So it does do this. See, it went with this B2. Let's actually apply this formula and see what we get. And as you can see, it works for the most part just fine. So it was able to get that B2 from C to E being our table and third column. And that's because for VLOOKUP, we have to start with the stock numbers column. So it's able to get that, but it's always adding this transactions here too, which is sort of annoying. And this is actually a problem, having this name of the tab in front of the reference, even though it works in this particular case. So let me show you what the problem is when you have this reference for the current sheet in the formula. Notice that instead of B2, which should be linking to the current sheet's B2, it's saying transactions B2, which is this name of this tab. Now, the problem with this is even though this formula currently returns the accurate results, what would happen if we go here and add, let's just some name, a column name, and decide we want to sort this data. So let's say I want to sort this with some column. So I'm going to sort this maybe by date. So if I go to this data set, go to this date column now and sort this, say, Z to A or A to Z. There's a lot of data here, so it's going to take a little bit, but there we are. So now this data is sorted. Now, notice how these two columns don't return the same information anymore. So this was the one I did with an XLOOKUP. And if you look here, it's still pointing to this right stock number on the left. And that's what it's using as the lookup value. But if I look at this one, instead of pointing to that B2 now, it's pointing to B1536, which is, I don't know, some data in line 1536. So the moment you sort this data, you would be in trouble because it would not get you the right results. So it's pointing, I'm still scrolling down to find it. It's pointing to this. So it's searching for this item's information in this line. And that's the trouble of having that name of the tab. So you should never have that name of the tab for the current tab, because when you sort your data, you're going to have this nightmare thing. So I'm going to go back, undo this a couple of times until I get that back to what it was before sorting. And this is what it was before sorting. So before sorting, we used to get the same information. Now watch what happens if I just go back and just get rid of that tab name. So I'm going to keep the same formula, just remove this reference to the name of the current sheet, which is the one that I'm on, transactions. And I'm going to copy this formula down. So everything else being the same, just that removed. So watch what happens what I do now when I sort this. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to sort using that same thing. I'll take this date column and let's say I want this data sorted Z to A. It's going to take a little bit, but there it is. It's sorted. And now notice I get the same information for both of them because I don't have that problem anymore. So now this is going to link to B2, which is the item in the current line. And this is also going to do that. It's going to link to our current line item. So that's something just to be careful about. This is not just VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP related. This is just a general thing you have to be concerned about when you're linking from your formulas from your current sheet. Do not have the name of the tab. I'm going to delete that. That's fine. So we're doing just fine. As you can see, it's doing our lookups. If we tell it where the information is, that will actually get us the right information. So let's do something with the salespeople. So maybe we want to get some data from here. So what if we ask something more complicated? Let's ask it to get first and last names to transactions. So this time in transactions, we got rep IDs. We have for those rep IDs matching rep IDs in salespeople here. And we're trying to, let's say, return their first and last names. So now I want 2 columns, not 1 column. Let's see what happens if we ask this to do that. So I'm going to go back, and apparently I'm going to have to redo this to get that information here because I didn't keep salespeople. So I'm going to keep transactions. That's fine. I'm going to get rid of these, keep salespeople. There's some hidden sheets here too. So let's just add this data boundaries for both of them, for transactions and salespeople. And let's say, let's keep this on, and let's say XLOOKUP first and last names from sales people. By the way, these columns are not called first and last names. They're just called first last. Hopefully it will figure out what that means. But for now, I'm just going to run that and see what happens. So it seems like it's doing some sort of concatenation, which is interesting. So let's just copy that and see how that works out. So I'm going to go back here, go to transactions and paste it here and hit enter. And I got a value error. So that didn't work. So basically what it's doing here, it's looking up the rep ID from column A in salespeople. And if I go to salespeople, A is rep ID. So that's correct. And we want to basically return B and C, those columns. And what it did, it actually built an array here to concatenate that B and C together like that. And then it did this blank. So basically that's what to do when there's no return. Now this is not correct. In this argument, it should be the type of match. So this should have been 0, or we should have skipped this. Now I'm still curious if XLOOKUP is going to be able to do that concatenation directly in a formula, and looks like it was. So if I remove that, and is this calculating? That's why it's taking so long, or is it? Yeah, it's calculating. That's why it's taking so long. So there's a lot of data in that other sheets, and because we're linking to the entire column, that took a bit. But as you can see, it worked, but this argument wasn't correct. It should have been 0, not whatever it did. So, or it should have, if you skip this, it would be fine too. And this blanks would be when there's no match, because we're doing this. So if I didn't do this double quotations here, it should have returned NAs. So if I remove all of those, just keep this part when it's doing this F2 being rep ID, searching in column A, and then we're getting B and C combined together with this concatenation. So I'll just press enter. This is taking a while for this to actually calculate. But it still does return the right information. I just have to copy this down. As a matter of fact, to make this formula a little faster, let me go back and ask it to, instead of linking to the whole column, to just use the data range. So let's ask a follow-up question. Can you use data range instead of the whole column? So there it is. It did do this now this time. It's linking to the actual range. So I'm going to copy that, go back, and we'll just paste it here. I think this is still lagging behind because it's just way too much. This is the type of things that like you wouldn't know this is not a good idea to do, even though this is something that works, like concatenating the entire column and then doing a lookup from that is, generally speaking, not a good idea, because it will first start by joining those two columns together and getting all that data and then doing the lookup, which will basically be a lot of problems with performance. As you can tell right now, I'm stuck, for example, because it's still calculating here and it's at like 8% of this calculation. That's what it shows me. So we can get into trouble apparently by doing things like that. So I would have to wait for this to finish, or I have to just shut this down in order for this to work. But let me try to just delete the whole column and hopefully it will stop recalculating. And it did. So now if I paste that same formula, so now instead of going the whole column A, it went from A2 through A46, which should be the actual data range here. See, from 2 through 46 is the row number here. So that is correct. That's our range of data. But again, it's not doing this formula right, because there should be no match here. It should either be 0 for exact match, or we should have just skipped it. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to skip this, and I'm going to skip this double quotes too. So at this point, this should get much faster because we're not concatenating the whole column. We're only concatenating our range of data that we have. And as you can see, we're able to do this concatenation. And if you're not familiar with concatenation, it's basically like adding text together. So that's what we're doing here. So let me actually go ask it to do this concatenate here, so you can see what that would look like if we just join first and last names. So I'm going to go here and add this thing here, and I'm going to say how to join first and last names. So I'm going to do that. And see, it gave me this formula. So I'm going to copy this, go back, and paste it right there, B2 and C2, and we can now copy this down. So I'm going to say full name or something. So if you look at this formula, this is that formula that it did internally within that XLOOKUP. So what we're doing, we're taking this value from B2, which is the first name, and then we use this and sign, which is the plus sign, basically for text, and we add the space, and then we also add the last name to that. Now here, it's doing it for just one row, and then we can just double click here or drag it down to get it for the rest of them. But this was pretty much done internally directly in the formula here. So when we have basically this entire B column, instead of just that first value, plus that empty blank, plus that C column, all of that done as a return column instead of being this. Is this CHAT GPT 4? No, this is 3.5 actually. I'm not cool enough to get access to API for CHAT GPT 4 yet. Hopefully I'll get access to that. So this is 3.5. There's another question. Don't think. So it's just custom dashboard with API. I have similar spreadsheet. Yeah. So this 3.5 basically. But as you can see, even 3.5 doesn't have problems with this. So we get our formulas just fine. It did the concatenation. That was nice. And see, these are the NAs for no matches. So typically that's what XLOOKUP would give you. And this is where if you add a comma here, you can say what to do instead of those NAs. And double quotes was the option given here, meaning blanks. So if I drag this down, we'll get those. There it is. So as you can see, no problems getting the XLOOKUPs. And the main thing here is that it needs to know where your information is. So once basically you do explain where your data is located. So once I explain like, this is the name of the tab, these are the columns, they're located in here, and your data starts here, your data ends here, and all that stuff, then no problem. It's able to get it done. But if you don't have that information, it typically fails without that. So yeah, there's your XLOOKUP. So we did some concatenate directly in XLOOKUP 2. I'm just going to call it full name, something like that. I'm trying to think if there is any other XLOOKUP we could potentially do here that we didn't do. So we joined things, we looked up, looks just fine. We did look up a different column in the middle. That works fine too, no problem. I think that's good enough. That covers pretty much the common things you would do. So getting some data from one sheet to another, and sometimes combining a couple of columns together and getting that together. So yeah, seems to be working fine. So let me know if you have any ideas for things we can try on this and see if it works. Maybe we'll try it next time. But for today, that should do it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.